CFL 110, your weekly trip around the biggest stories in the Canadian Football League with Jeff Hamilton and Andrew Hustler Paterson.
What is up, everyone, and welcome to another edition of CFL 110. The Labor Day Classics are done. The rematches are over, and it's now the stretch drive to the Canadian Football League playoffs and the Grey Cup in Winnipeg in November. Andrew Paterson, soon to be joined by Jeff Hamilton. We'll take you through all the action on the weekend and look ahead to some big games in the Canadian Football League. And of course, make our picks for our friends at CoolBet. If you haven't played at CoolBet before, check out our weekly CFL Boosted Parlay and everything else our friends at CoolBet have cooking. And if you haven't played there before, use the promo code WST for a 100% bonus on your first deposit up to $200. Let's get this show on the road and welcome in the Hammer, Jeff Hamilton from the Winnipeg Free Press. What's good, dude? How are you?
Not bad, my friend. As you mentioned, a critical weekend wrapped up in the 3-down loop. The one coming after that Labor Day Classic, those rematches. I think it wasn't maybe as an exciting weekend as previous as that Labor Day Classic weekend was, but it's certainly the results were certainly important. And there was obviously a lot of excitement in this week. So I can't wait to chop it up. Look ahead towards next week. This is getting into the final third of the season. This is when really teams start to separate themselves. The races start to heat up, and all the actions is super important. So looking forward to these next few shows here and really finishing up the season strong.
Yeah, listen, I mean, the triple header on Saturday did not quite have the drama of the Labor Day weekend. However, the Friday night opener certainly did. And full disclosure, I'm a big Chiefs guy. We had the Chiefs opener. I am watching the Chiefs in the Mahomes show against the Chargers, but of course made sure to have the Jays on another TV and keeping very close attention to the BC Ottawa game, which, to be honest, for most of the night looked over. And then it wasn't. And the comeback, well, I don't know. This is probably now 3.0. 2.0 fell just short in Winnipeg, but 18-point rally in the fourth quarter. And Ottawa stuns BC, Jeff. And listen, great win for Ottawa to keep their season alive. My takeaway is I just can't believe this happened to BC again. I mean, just coming off that 50-burger they gave up in Toronto, they're in complete control of this football game. And again, it must have been a long, quiet flight home to the West Coast because, I mean, it's hard to believe BC is where they are in the standings right now. But then you look at games like this where they just find a way to be a point or two worse than their opponent by the end of 60 minutes.
Yeah, I can't sit here right now, Huss, and say that I haven't seen it before. I was in Ottawa for the comeback. I saw it firsthand about them eliminate what looked to be a sure victory for Winnipeg, just evaporate because of Dustin Crum, and that win, I believe, was in overtime, that rushing touchdown. So this is a guy who. These performances are few and far between, Huss. He doesn't get a ton of opportunities. He's not a starting quarterback in the CFL, so all the opportunity Dustin Crum's earned has been through injury to the starter. In this case, obviously, Drew Brown. But what a performance, man. I mean, a career high 301 passing yards. I believe he finished with one passing touchdown, which turned out to be the winner to Eugene Lewis at the end, which was the first lead, I'll remind viewers, of the Redblacks in that game, which came with 17 seconds left in the game. So certainly a valiant effort again from Crum. He also rushed for 2 touchdowns at 69 rushing yards, and it was, I suggest, a vintage Dustin Crum performance for a guy who doesn't have a ton of tape. I'm not sure what this does for Dustin Crum's career, Huss. I'm not sure what it does for Ottawa's season, but they needed both. They needed that performance to get it done. They needed to erase the lead. They scored 18 points in that fourth quarter to win by 1 point. So they needed all of that just to stay alive. At 4-8, they're in not a great situation, but they're in a position where that third place in the East is up for grabs. Toronto, obviously, also a team with at 4-8. They were on the bye this past week, but overall, that East is shaping up to be an interesting race, and so is the West. The BC Lions, Huss. I mean, this one hurts. This one hurts big time, as you mentioned. Having that 50 burger put up to the up against them against Toronto in their game prior, to lose this one by the skin of their teeth is going to be a difficult one to swallow. As you mentioned, I'm not sure how that plane ride home was, but it was probably a really quiet one. Some of these wounds were self-inflicted. Huss, a majority of their penalties, their lack of discipline occurred in that final quarter, which helped Ottawa get back in that game. Turnovers as well. So it's a messy loss, a big victory for Ottawa, but a messy loss for the BC Lions, who are reeling right now at 5-7 in the West, and tied with, dare we suggest, the surging Edmonton Elks.
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, that's what's happening in the league right now. The teams that really stunk at the start of the year are making big pushes. And just on Crum, I mean, what a performance, as you mentioned. I mean, a guy that if you started him in CFL fantasy, you were pretty darn happy. I mean, putting up the 69 and 2 TDs on the ground, in addition to 300 in the air and a touchdown, exactly what the Ottawa team needed. And they got it just in the nick of time with that late fourth quarter rally. While we're talking about the East, we move on to game number 2, and the Hamilton Tiger Cats completely snuffed out the Montreal Alouettes, who I believe have now lost 5 straight games. And Jeff, well, you mentioned where Ottawa is at 4-8, battling for third with Toronto. Both of those teams are now just 1 game back of the Montreal Alouettes for the second playoff spot, and it is game on in the East. Good for Hamilton, certainly, to get back in the win column. They had been close a number of times over the past month, but just hadn't gotten the job done. A pretty thorough performance, especially from that Ticat defense, for a full 60 minutes in the opener on Saturday to convincingly take hold of first place in the East and leave the rest of those 3 teams within a game of each other.
Yeah, Huss, it looks like Montreal just continues to be the free bingo space for the league. This one, to me, did not feel particularly close at all. And I think it says something that Montreal was coming off the bye week, and Hamilton was playing on was one of those teams that played on the Monday, right? So it's not like Hamilton
I got
was
suckered in by that, by the way.
Yeah, it's not like Hamilton was in a great situation to rebound with a dominating victory as they did, especially on the road. But here we are, right? What a victory it was. And it's funny because you look at Hamilton now, you talk about big victories. At 7-5, it looks like they got a stranglehold on the East. It's going to take a lot for teams below them, including Montreal, to make up that space. And the way that Montreal's been playing, I think they're more concerned of the 2 teams below them in Ottawa and Toronto catching up. So the Ticats, also we're down in the dirt too. They snapped a 3-game losing streak to get back in the win column. So that one stops the bleeding, and again, kind of secures their first place in the East. A lot would have to happen for Toronto and Montreal. Toronto and Ottawa to catch up. And with the way Montreal's been playing, I almost feel like they're in the worst situation to win the East. So it looks like a pretty good situation for Hamilton. You look at Montreal here, Huss, and we've talked about this over and over again. I've written about it several occasions. I'll write about it again this week. But that decision to play Davis Alexander is just not weeks ago is just not a good one, and it's looking worse and worse every week. Clearly, their quarterback situation, while they have a couple veterans, they've opted to go with James Morgan. That feels like a big mistake at this point. He got his full bye week. I'm assuming he spent a majority of that bye week getting ready for this game, and to see the performance he put forward, especially with having Tyson Philpott and having Austin Mack back in the lineup, right? Those 2 big targets. They were not only supposed to open the passing game, but also giving guys like Charleston Rambo, Cole Speaker, Tyler Sneed, guys who have been carrying the load, maybe a little extra room because of their talent and need for coverage. So that just didn't pan out in any way. And now the Montreal Alouettes are reeling. I think they're one of the worst teams, if not the worst team in the league right now. And until they can get Davis Alexander behind center, I don't see that changing, and more importantly, the results changing anytime soon.
Yeah, listen, Montreal is really trying to find it right now, and without Davis Alexander, they seem lost. I mean, they get Mac back and some of their other weapons. It didn't matter very much because they just did not get the quarterback play to move the chains and have any sustained offense. For Hamilton, we should mention their run game, which exploded in that game. And Greg Bell, 20 carries, 156 yards and a touchdown. And Bo Levi Mitchell with his first rushing touchdown since 2015. Bo had pretty pedestrian passing numbers, but they did it on the ground. And I mentioned the defense right off the bat. A second half shutout ended up icing the game and controlling first place in the East for the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Speaking of second half shutouts, that's exactly what happened to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at home in the Banjo Bowl. After a really exciting back and forth game in Regina on Labor Day that went right down to the wire, this was a game that in a lot of ways turned on one play when Zach Collaros was injured and knocked out of the game. And after that, the Bomber offense led by Chris Strevler had absolutely no answers for the Saskatchewan defense, who put up the goose egg to ice the sweep of the Labor Day Classic in the Banjo Bowl. Riders now in complete control of the West, really only with Calgary to worry about chasing them for first place. Meanwhile, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are back to 500, and were it not for the comeback, and the Ottawa Redblacks would be sitting there in third place only by a count of a tie. We'll get to Edmonton in a minute, but much like the East right now, Jeff, those three teams at the bottom of the West are pretty close. But thoughts on the aftermath of this one for both the Bombers and the Saskatchewan Roughriders?
Yeah, this one stings for Winnipeg. And as you mentioned, I think it solidifies or gets pretty close to that, the Riders finishing first place. That was obviously, we'll get to it, a key loss from Calgary over Edmonton. That really did create some much needed breathing room, because I think a lot of people heading into this weekend, Huss, would have looked at Calgary as a second place team in the West as being probably the team that was going to leapfrog Saskatchewan, especially when you consider that Calgary has already wrapped up that season series and therefore has the tiebreaker when all is said and done. That being said, this one, as great as it was for the Riders, this one is equally as painful for Winnipeg. And Winnipeg right now, Hustler, they're in a really, really, really bad situation. I mean, this is a team that is reeling. I mean, I don't know, especially when you consider the injury and potential loss of Zach Collaros. I mean, we're taping this Tuesday morning. I don't think Zach will be out at practice this week, or at least today, as they get ready for their preparations for their Saturday game in Hamilton. Don't think he'll be ready, and because it's a short week, because of the nature of the injury, we still don't know what that injury will look like. We know that Zach's been dealing with neck issues this year that's held him out or sidelined him from games. It felt maybe higher than that. I think you know where I'm going. It looked like Zach was motionless, potentially even unconscious from the hit. So you immediately start thinking about head injuries and concussion protocols and all those things. That's obviously purely speculative at this point. But from what I'm hearing, I think it's for sure a cautious approach. Now, do I think, from what I've been hearing, do I think Zach Collaros is done for the year or done for his career? Not at all. I expect him to be back. I think there were certainly signs from that, Huss, in the game where you saw Zach jog to the locker room, was able to, not just leave the field on his own, was able to jog off the field on his own. And then he was seen in the dressing room after the game in his sweatpants and sweatsuit and whatnot. So those things are positive signs, I think, for the long-term prognosis. But as in the short-term prognosis and the long-term prognosis of this Winnipeg Blue Bombers outfit, they're in trouble, Huss, much like Montreal's in trouble in the East. I think Winnipeg is in trouble in the West. And as you mentioned, the BC Lions did them a massive favor by essentially losing in the dying moments of their game to give Winnipeg that cushion and keep them in a playoff spot. Because I don't know if Winnipeg continues to play the way they've been playing and has Chris Strevler as their number one option behind center, I think we could be talking about more losses than wins here in the future.
Yeah, I mean, listen, to me, there's two things on this when it comes to Zach. I mean, first of all, everyone's concerned being at the game. That happened right in front of me. It did look pretty scary. And, you know what he's had happen to him in the past, what he's meant to this organization. There was a real sincere concern for his well-being. Listen, if it is a concussion, then I think there are conversations that he's going to have with his family and the Winnipeg Football Club on what is the best thing to do for him going forward. One thing, though, Jeff, that I know that the Winnipeg Blue Bombers have to be thinking about right now, and this goes back to conversations we had on Winnipeg Sports Talk in the offseason, a succession plan for Zach Collaros. I mean, at some point, his contract was up at the end of the year. They extended it one more year. As long as Taylor Elgersma is down in the National Football League, you're looking for work and not here in Winnipeg, there's no clear quarterback that's going to take the post-Collaros era and run. I don't think it's Chris Streveler, and we really haven't seen much of Terry Wilson. So that's a bigger question, I think, for the organization, going into the offseason. Right now, though, potentially with Zach Collaros, the question is, can they get some wins and stay in the playoff picture and see what they can do in the playoffs, probably on the road, trying to get back to Winnipeg for the 112th Grey Cup. Wrapping up the weekend was the rematch of the Battle of Alberta, and what a performance on the ground by the Edmonton Elks. Justin Rankin goes for 2 bills and a 90-yard touchdown, and the Elks come back after being thoroughly dominated in Calgary the week before with one of the more surprising wins of the week. You just cannot kill this Elks team. And by the way, shout out to Edmonton fans. They've been served up a lot of bleep sandwiches for the last 5 years. They showed up, 28,000 plus, a great atmosphere at Commonwealth, and they were rewarded with a hell of a game against their biggest rivals. Dare I say, brighter days are ahead with the Edmonton Elks after the stench of the Chris Jones era. I'm not sure that they make the playoffs, but they're at least going in a positive direction, and that's what this team absolutely had to do. And maybe no bigger win all year than beating their interprovincial rivals in the rematch of the Labor Day game.
Here's my take with the Edmonton Elks, Huss. There is no silver linings, man. There is no silver linings with this organization. There's no silver linings with this fan base. You can't just say, what a valiant effort again it was by the Edmonton Elks to try to make the playoffs in a league where 66% of the teams make the postseason, right? Like, it just doesn't hit. No one's going to care, and no one's going to give a shit about what the Elks did between weeks 12 and 18 if they don't make the playoffs. And this is what they've done. They put themselves in a position, not a great position because of where they started this season, but they put themselves in a situation nonetheless, after we'd been speaking for weeks about this team is down and out, to be tied with the BC Lions and 1 game back of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So that end, when you consider they also have better records than the Ottawa Redblacks and Toronto Argonauts, they're not only looking for a West playoff spot, the East crossover is all of a sudden in play for Edmonton right now. And all Edmonton needs to worry about is not what they did earlier in the season. It's about what they're doing now and continuing to put those victories together. I'm writing about this in my CFL Rundown column this week. But Edmonton has a very interesting situation. They play, I believe, 2 more games against the East at home and then play 4 games against the West. That is ultimately going to dictate where they end up this year. They played fairly well against the East this season, but yeah, they have 2 away games against Toronto and then against Hamilton, and then the last 4 games of their season is against 4 teams in the East. They're at home against Saskatchewan, they're at home against Winnipeg, which will be critical games for those standings. Then they're on the road against BC, and then they wrap things up with what will be a very important Alberta game again. Huss, that 3rd and final game against the Calgary Stampeders is where the Edmonton Elks wrap up their regular season schedule. Is it a bit premature to be talking about that game? Yeah, a little bit, but given where the West standings are at right now, with Calgary probably not in a position to catch the Riders much anymore, and well ahead of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, that game's probably going to mean nothing for the Stampeders in week 21. So it's going to mean, and it will likely mean everything to Edmonton. So Edmonton, and this is just a roundabout way and a long-winded way of saying that Edmonton is not in a great situation, but their success in recent weeks has put them in a position to fight for their future, which didn't really feel like it was possible a month ago. And if they can continue to get these wins, if they can beat some teams, if they continue to trend upwards and get performances from Cody Fajardo in the pass game, Justin Rankin in the run game, Javon Leake in the return game, and put together a defense that can put the lid on some opposing offenses, we might be talking much differently about the Edmonton Elks in a month's time.
Yeah, no, listen, but I'll disagree with you on your initial point that it really doesn't matter unless they make the playoffs. Listen, I spend enough time talking with the guys on Edmonton Sports Talk every day in the lock shop. Like it's hard for me even in Winnipeg, and I have to go back to the time like pre-Mike O'Shea era where this team sucked forever to kind of consider about how bad it's been in Edmonton. And listen, they've done a few things this year. They've moved on to a new head coach that seems to have them going the right direction. They have found a quarterback in Cody Fajardo that legitimately gives them a chance to win, and they've invested and given him the reins to run, and they've been winning football games. But the biggest thing, and it seemed like, with all the BS about, people aren't going because of the name change or anything like that, it was all garbage. They just sucked, and it was taking the life out of what had for a long time been one of the great environments in the Canadian Football League to watch a team, and the fans had completely lost faith, and they frankly felt like losers for supporting a team that was continually doing the same thing and going in the wrong direction. So listen, if they can make the playoffs and get a playoff game, huge win for the organization. But I'll tell you what, if they're playing meaningful games throughout, seemingly continuing to move in the right direction, even if they don't make the playoffs, I think it's a huge win for the organization, and it will legitimately raise the expectations next year.
To what? To making the playoffs finally? To raise the expectations. Like, what are you, like them? They're losers now. They're 5-8 or 5. What are they?
They're 5-7 right now.
They're 5-7
after starting off 1-6.
Yeah, but this is the same story in Edmonton the last 3 seasons.
No. This is a way different story this year.
A bit different.
There was absolutely nothing to believe in before, and people in Edmonton right now actually have something to believe in and look forward to. It was an embarrassment before. I'll argue that this team is on the right track. We'll see what they're able to accomplish, but I've got a hell of a lot more confidence right now in the direction of this team, where they're going, than where they've been for the last 5 years.
This is where the Edmonton Elks get confidence, Huss. In week 14, 15, 16 of the season, my point about the playoffs is if they don't make the playoffs in the position they're in now at 5-7, they blew it down the stretch. They're in the thick of it with the Bombers, with the BC Lions, the Bombers who probably don't have Zach Collaros, the BC Lions who are doing everything and anything to lose games, and they're ahead of the Toronto Argonauts and Ottawa Redblacks. If the Edmonton Elks don't make the playoffs this year, there's no good feelings in the front office. There's no like maybe they get it in next year. It is an absolute bust at this stage. To your point, they found their quarterback.
What were your expectations for them this year?
Making the playoffs. Making the playoffs is my expectation for every single CFL team every single year. There's not a single team that should go into a season and say that playoffs isn't their goal, man.
No, it's absolutely there. Listen, the goal is winning the Grey Cup for every team. Never mind making the playoffs.
Realistically, though, there's goals.
I think Rome isn't built in a day, and that thing was burnt to the ground. And I'll just say I think they've done a good job of building. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. But regardless, well, listen, if they just fall apart and lose the rest of their games, then okay, maybe. But I do think that, listen, if you're an Elks fan, you're as positive and upbeat right now as you've been in 5 years. And that is very important for a team that completely lost their fan base. Listen,
I got nothing against the Elks. I'm not trying to dump on that parade. I'm just saying that I think to your point, if they're not playing for that game to make the playoffs or not in week 21 against Calgary, this did not end up, they lost that mojo or that juju that they've been gaining in recent weeks.
Yeah,
is what
okay,
I'm saying.
listen, for sure. But I mean, I guess the point is they've come far enough. They've earned that expectation, because there hasn't been a time in the last 5 years that 12 games into the season, we were talking about an Elks team that was legitimately potentially a playoff team. I know last year they got in a little bit of a run, but it wasn't realistic. This year it is. And
fair.
Mark Killam and the staff are doing a pretty good job at turning it around. All right, quickly, before we get to our picks for the weekend and the lines, couple big ones this year in the Canadian Football League. Just a couple quick league notes, including longtime colleague of yours, Tim Baines, who's done such a great job covering the CFL for a long time, writing his final column in Ottawa.
Yeah, so Timmy's one of my favorite guys covering the beat, having covered the beat the last 10 years. I've had a chance to grow a lot of friendships and relationships with guys in other markets, especially traveling to those markets, once or twice a year. Always have a great time catching up them. And Tim Baines is one of my favorite people on the beat. He's one of those. I'll tell a quick story about Tim Baines. In 2016, it was my first Grey Cup. And I ran into, it was in Toronto. Bombers weren't in it. The paper sent me out there to network and just kind of get my footing in the league. And what better opportunity to do that than obviously Grey Cup week. So anyways, I get there. I go about midweek. It wasn't one of those typical early weeks. About midweek, the party has started, if you will. And I end up that first night, end up staying up pretty late and meeting Tim Baines and another Ottawa Sun colleague, Don Brennan. Anyone who knows Don Brennan, another great character in the CFL list. Anyways, long story longer, Huss, I end up spending much of my first evening there drinking with these guys to the wee hours of the night. And then the next day, as we all rallied together to take on another day of CFL coverage, I find, I'm excited. I've found some new friends on the beat. I hadn't really been able to necessarily create those relationships throughout the year, but what a great and cool opportunity to do it last night with some colleagues. Anyways, I'm there at a Redblacks press conference, and I go sit beside Tim and Don's there with them too, and I shit you not, Huss, they had no recollection of me the night before. Zero. Didn't know who I was, what I was doing beside the blah, blah. And I'm telling you, man, I spent hours with them the night before, and they looked at me.
Didn't make much of an impression, apparently.
Like I was a ghost. And and I called them out. I go, "Are you guys kidding me?" And anyways, it was hilarious. We become close friends ever since. So I wish Timmy the best in retirement. I know it has a serious note to it. His wife got recently diagnosed. Kellyanne, who's a great woman, has always been a great host when we've gone to Ottawa. She got diagnosed with a brain tumor, so he's taking the time off to spend time with her. But I just wish them all the best. And Tim the best in this next chapter with his wife, with his family, and terrific work, terrific career, and he'll certainly be missed on the CFL. I have a feeling I'm going to see him around. I don't think it's the last we've heard of Tim Baines, particularly when it comes to the CFL, but certainly this chapter in the newspaper business, which he'd been in for more than 40 years, an incredible career comes to an end here. With probably some more left here, but certainly congratulations to Tim on the retirement.
Yeah, all the best to Tim, and thanks for all of his great coverage of the Canadian Football League from us here at CFL 110. All right, let's get to one more thing, and we kind of touched on it briefly. I will say this, coming out of the Banjo Bowl, incredible defensive performance by Saskatchewan. I thought the Winnipeg Blue Bombers defense, unfortunately for Bombers and their fans, probably had their two best games of the year in these two losses. But again, the big story was Zach Collaros. And Jeff, it was clear, listen, being in the building, it was a scary moment, and people cared deeply about Zach, and with his history, everyone knew. But, friends of ours, Milt Stegall, Enoch Mwamba on TSN afterwards, pretty passionate about Zach's future and Zach's decisions. Was this a little premature in your mind, considering the fact that we really didn't know anything other than what we saw on the field?
Yeah, to me, it was kind of shocking, to be honest with you, of hearing it. Not like, and here, I should start off by saying, look, Milt Stegall and Enoch Mwamba, probably two of the nicest guys and great contributors on the CFL and TSN panel. So it's not like I think their comments were ill-intentioned.
It came out of great empathy, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. But it just felt still so premature. And it felt like, to me, Huss, being in this industry, it felt like you had to talk about, like, you almost need to create sound bites. And I'm not saying that's what they were doing, but it was like, this was the story coming out of it. Rather than talking about what the Bombers would be doing and pushing forward potentially without Zach Collaros, it went into, his injury history, his history of concussions. And we all know his history of concussions. They're well documented. I guess the counter to that would be that he hasn't suffered a documented concussion since early in 2019. So for anyone doing the math, that's quite a bit of time ago, right? It's six years ago. He has had some neck injuries, and I know there's some people who are probably rolling their eyes right now saying, oh yeah, I'm sure it's a neck injury, not a concussion. I think if you want to take that route, you need to be, what you're essentially doing is calling out a medical staff who cares about the players and health first and foremost. I like to think that there isn't a single medical team in the CFL that would prioritize winning over a player's health. And I can certainly say it, with full confidence that doesn't exist here in Winnipeg. Guys like Al Couture are the standard when it comes to player safety, player health, and rehabilitation, right? He's not going to put his players in harm's way. So I thought when you consider the injury history, I just felt it was way too premature to be talking about things like I would never play football again. Like, again, I know Milt's heart's in the right place, but like to say that he should never, and again, built off the assumption that it's a concussion, right? It was built off all speculation of what the injury was. Again, did it look bad? Does it look like a concussion? Sure. But this idea of ending a guy's career in your comments seemed a little premature. And Enoch as well, mentioning stuff like of course he should be worried about the quality of life. Of course he should be worried about, a decision he made with his family. Those are things that the veteran quarterback has thought about. I don't know, talking about him, giving him advice about him talking to his wife about his future and how, essentially saying if he wants to play with his grandkids when he's older. Like, I don't think that was the post-game analysis that was required and necessary for what we saw in the field, even though it was a serious injury by Zach Collaros.
Yeah, listen, I can tell you just from, walking out conversations with people, the conversations around the game were about Zach and were about his future. And I kind of get why they went there because, listen, if you were there and you watched it in front of your eyes, sometimes the most logical answer is the one that it seems to be, and that would be a concussion. He was sort of lifeless on the ground for a while before getting up and running off. And sure. Listen, all of that, and again, I go back. There is a lot of empathy for Zach, what he's done for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, his incredible CFL career. We want to see him out there. Certainly Winnipeg Blue Bomber fans know what this team looks like without him. But at the same point, the bottom line is that, his personal health and, moving forward is going to be very important, but we'd love to see him back out there, and we wish him all the best in coming back if he is able to this season for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Let's get to the picks over at CoolBet, your number one spot for betting the Canadian Football League. We've got a couple of big numbers this week, Jeff, but we start off with a doubleheader on Friday. Producer Remus is going to love that. Late night games, but the early game, 6 p.m. Central Time, Winnipeg in Hamilton. Let's assume that this is a non-Zach Collaros lineup based on what we know right now doing the show. The Hamilton Tiger Cats are 5.5-point favorites, minus 233 on the money line. Bombers plus 5.5, plus 187 on the money line. The total is 52.5. Can the Winnipeg Blue Bombers win or at least keep this one tight if they don't have Zach Collaros at the helm?
Yeah, this is the problem for me. Obviously, assuming Zach won't be in the lineup, I just don't think that Chris Streveler and his weapons are going to be able to go stride for stride with Bo Levi Mitchell and his weapons, right? Not a lot of teams have been able to do that all season long. So to assume that Chris Streveler will somehow match Bo Levi Mitchell shot for shot seems unrealistic. It seems even more unrealistic when you factor in Winnipeg's defense and Hamilton's defense. Hamilton's defense has not been playing exceptionally well by any stretch of the imagination, but is coming off a good game. I feel like Winnipeg's defense has played okay at times, but hasn't played well enough to stop Bo Levi Mitchell and what he brings to the table. So in this situation, 5.5 points feels high. It doesn't feel as high when you factor in Hamilton playing at home. The Bombers seem to never play well at Tim Hortons Field unless it's the Grey Cup, and always seem to to lay an egg at this time of the year against a Hamilton team, regardless of where they are in the standings, and then being at the top of the East, not wanting to give up that breathing room, and then again taking full advantage of an injured Zach Collaros is a recipe for success, and a victory, in my opinion, that exceeds a touchdown, let alone the 5.5 points right now.
Yeah, listen, I mean, for me, I mean, the offense is going up against each other. It's a bit of a mismatch right now. I mean, even with Zach Collaros, I'd argue that the Hamilton Tiger Cat offense has been at or near top of the year. We know what Bo's doing. We certainly know what Kenny Lawler is doing. I do think the Winnipeg Blue Bombers defense played well enough to win both of these last couple games. I mean, they held Trevor Harris to under 215 or 219 in the first game, under 250 again last week. I mean, they did give up a couple big plays, namely that long pass from the 1 yard line. But overall, for all the concerns that Winnipeg had about their defense and their secondary about a month ago, it's actually really rounded out well, and they've played. Now, listen, if this team wants to be a playoff team, this defense is going to need to lead the way moving forward. I mean, I'm not sure what you can count on from the offense, especially if Zach isn't there, which brings us to, can they hang around with Hamilton? And I got to tell you, I mean, if you just look at the history of Winnipeg going out to Tim Hortons Field, with the exception of the Grey Cup against the Ticats, it is more often than not ugly for the visitors. And I think that with what they're dealing with right now, again, I have a feeling when they're coming back, they'll be just very thankful about what happened last week with BC losing that game. They've still got a little bit of wiggle room, because to me, this is a very, very tough spot for Winnipeg coming off these back-to-back losses. And I think the smart money is on Hamilton at -5.5. We get a rematch from the game we started the show off talking about, the comeback in Ottawa last week. 18 points in the fourth quarter for the Redblacks as they stun BC. These two teams are going right back at it in British Columbia. And the BC Lions are 9.5 point favorites. It certainly seems like the books feel like what happened on Friday night was an anomaly, and we will see a resounding statement by the BC Lions that this is not happening again. You like the BC Lions getting back on the fast track at home and winning by double digits?
I actually hate that line, Huss. Like, I don't think I hate it because it's probably accurate. That's the part that I hate, right? Like, I hate giving the BC Lions or expecting the BC Lions to cover essentially 10 points here, because BC isn't good, right? Like, just BC has proven time and time again that they're
going to put up 40 to win.
They're a team that's, very much can't stop opposing offenses, but don't have a problem letting teams back into it, falling apart, those kind of things, right? So to think that Ottawa, who is playing for their lives as well, can keep it within 10 points. I just, had you told me it was going to be 6.5 points, I would have been a slam dunk for BC. Asking them to do more than that, to me, is a little bit questionable. I'm going to lean into the comeback. I'm going to lean into the dual threat quarterback. I don't think Drew Brown is necessarily ready to come back. I mean, I think that's good news if he is, and that makes the 9.5 points even better if you're taking Ottawa. But I do think that, crazier things have happened here, and to expect the BC Lions to go out and just beat anybody by double digits, even if it's the Ottawa Redblacks, the struggling Ottawa Redblacks, especially after they came back and did, but they have that confidence over BC. So I'm reluctantly, certainly not confidently, taking the Ottawa Redblacks at +9.5 on the road.
I'm going to hold my nose and lay the points with BC. I've seen this one before. I mean,
I think you're probably right, man. I don't feel good about man.
Blows it and then has an opportunity at home the next week to right the wrong. I feel that they do that. Listen, as a Bomber guy, I'd love to see Ottawa find a way to win this football game or keep it close, but I have a feeling it's going to be a great week to have Nathan Rourke on your CFL fantasy team. I'll say with that. I'm going to take the BC Lions and lay the big number. Fascinating game on Saturday afternoon. We've got the Edmonton Elks at 5-7 going to Toronto to take on the Argos at 4-8, who have saved their season with these last 2 wins. And now all of a sudden it sounds like Chad Kelly is getting near a return. I'll say this right off the bat. I don't know how. I don't care whether Chad Kelly comes in and looks like the MOP in practice. Nick Arbuckle is behind center if I'm the head coach with what he's done this year and the way this team has rallied behind him, and I think really believes in him right now. This game is Toronto minus 3.5 against Edmonton. Just first off, thoughts on the quarterback situation in Toronto, and then let us know what your pick is against the spread.
I think it's minus 3.5 for Toronto because they're anticipating Chad Kelly's going to be behind center. And that's no disrespect to Nick Arbuckle. To your point, Huss, I think Nick Arbuckle has played incredibly well this year. I think he's opened up possibilities for his future in this league, maybe even a potential shot at being a number one somewhere. That's just never going to be in Toronto.
Would he be available at the trade deadline for a team in the West that might need a quarterback?
I don't think so, just because of the way he's been playing. And why would Toronto want to do that, right? Could you imagine? Right? Yeah, of course. Would there be interest? Yeah, I imagine so for sure.
I know one team.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, exactly. Now, I don't think that's possible. Personally, I think there's an argument to be made to play Nick Arbuckle over Chad Kelly. I just don't buy into it, and it's for one main reason. Ryan Dinwiddie has not been shy to say that Chad Kelly is the best quarterback in the league, is our number one quarterback, all those things. Like, I don't think he really cares who his quarterback is unless it's Chad Kelly. Like, I think Ryan Dinwiddie's convinced that he could do what he's done for Nick Arbuckle to anybody in this league, because he believes that his offensive scheme, and there's no disrespect, I'm not saying that Ryan Dinwiddie disrespects Nick Arbuckle, but even when he was talking about him in the Grey Cup game last year, right? It's almost kind of like, yeah, Nick's does what he needs to do, and that's great, and he's essentially looking at, and there's no way that Ryan Dinwiddie's looking at Nick Arbuckle and going, yeah, he's absolutely lights out this year. I get he's leading the league in receiving yards, is one back of Bo Levi Mitchell for passing touchdowns. He's looking at the fact that they're 4-8, man, and clinging to a playoff spot, not clinging currently to a playoff spot, hoping to cling to a playoff spot in due time. And I think he thinks his best way of doing that is getting Chad Kelly behind center. I've said this in the past. You can dislike Chad Kelly for what he's done off the field. I certainly would add myself to that group, but you can't deny his ability on the field. He brings a certain swagger to the offense, a certain confidence to the offense. And I think they've been waiting for Chad Kelly now for a while. And as soon as he's ready, which it seems to be based on his social media post teasing this upcoming game against Edmonton, that it's going to be this week. And I think for those reasons, I'm still taking Edmonton with the points. I think Edmonton has been doing something special, and they aren't going to want to stop anytime soon, obviously. But I'm looking at some hiccups potentially for Chad Kelly, maybe starting a bit slow and maybe even climbing his way back into this game after a slow start. So I'm going to go with the Elks at plus 3.5 points and hope that Chad Kelly has a slow return in his debut this year, and that the Elks can continue to ride that momentum that they built up in recent weeks.
I'm just going to say this. I got a ton of respect for Ryan Dinwiddie. He is right there with the top coaches in the Canadian Football League, but I think he is insane if he starts anybody other than Nick Arbuckle in this football game. You look at the way they've gotten off the mat. Their last two games, Nick Arbuckle has passed for nearly 800 yards, 6 touchdowns, no picks, led a incredible comeback in the Labor Day game against the Ticats, put up 52 the game before against the BC Lions. He is cooking right now, and at a certain point, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The offense is running. I don't know why you would change that, even if you have a guy that you have said traditionally is your starter. He's missed the entire season. This is the guy that has really put the team on his back to keep them in the mix right now. And if it was up to me, I'm playing Nick Arbuckle. That being said, I'm not sure this is a great thing for the Argos to even be dealing with right now. They have to win this football game. I think Edmonton is an equally desperate team. I mean, they're in very similar situations when you look at where these two teams sit.
They're fighting for the same playoff spot.
At the bottom of their division, but within a game of being in a playoff spot in your division right now. I think this is going to be a hell of a football game. I think it'll be close. We're getting 3 and the hook on Edmonton. I will take the points and take Edmonton plus 3.5. But I think this might be the best game of the week when you look at what we've got set up right now for it. Certainly it's got the shortest spread, and I think if you were thinking about a close game, this would be it. Final one, Montreal at Saskatchewan. The Riders coming off their sweep of the Bombers in the Banjo Bowl, 8.5-point favorites against the Alouettes, who are going in the wrong direction.
With the way that the Riders were playing pretty much all season, but especially over these last couple of weeks, and I know it was obviously a close call in that Labor Day Classic against Winnipeg, but Winnipeg, is always going to show up for those games for the most part. I just don't see them slowing down. In Montreal, assuming that Davis Alexander is missing another week, and all signs point to him doing just that.
I don't think it's a great spot for him to return, to be honest.
No, it's not it wouldn't be a great spot, of course, but I think this is a great spot for Saskatchewan to continue their dominance, right? And when you look at high point spreads, to me, I look at, you look at the three different phases of football, and outside of maybe Montreal's defense is, I'm still giving them credit, but much like we've seen in recent weeks, particularly against Hamilton, against Winnipeg before, if your offense can't move the ball and can't stay on the field, it's just adding more pressure to your defense to deliver. So with as much pressure as they need, I think at the end of the day, you definitely you have Montreal that's going to be having a hard time putting up points, and you're going to have Saskatchewan's defense who's taking the ball away at an incredible clip, an offense that is moving the ball, and a special teams that is also dangerous. I don't think double-digit victory is out of the question at all when it comes to Saskatchewan. So I'm taking them to cover the 8.5 points.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think this is going to be a long day at the office for the Montreal Alouettes, barring Davis Alexander returning and putting the team on his back. To me, Saskatchewan is just in another area code right now than Montreal, coming off the two big wins against their biggest rival, looking to stay on top in the West. I think the Riders roll. I'll lay the 8 points. So we're both on Hamilton, Edmonton, and Saskatchewan. We're taking the other sides of the big line with Ottawa and BC. We will put up a CFL 110 parlay over at CoolBet. Hammer, great stuff. Another big week as the push to the playoffs continues in the Canadian Football League. As always, great to catch up with you, and I will look forward to breaking it all down next week right here on CFL 110.
Thank you, my friend. And as always, appreciate everybody tuning in. Tell a friend, tell an enemy, anyone who loves the CFL football, let them know we go every week on Tuesdays, and we love chopping up the week that was, and also looking at the week that's coming. So thanks everybody for coming out, and I really appreciate the support. We'll see you again next week.
Thanks again, of course, to our friends at CoolBet. Use the promo code WST over at CoolBet if you haven't played there before. Make sure to check the combo cards for our weekly CFL 110 boosted parlay. For Jeff Hamilton, I'm Andrew Paterson. We'll see you next week right here on CFL 110.
You've been listening to CFL 110. Tune in next week for more great Canadian football discussion.